Hello, 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 Sandra. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Oh, I'm excited. I'm excited.
Me too. This is going to be a great conversation.
Oh, yes, it will. Yes, it will. Um, Again, I want to thank you for agreeing to do this. And I always, we always have good chats, and I know this today's format will be in the form of um, a presentation and followed up with a Q&A and discussion. So I thank you again so much for agreeing to do this and joining us for National Small Business Week 2023.
Mhm.
And this is a very important topic, legally protecting your business operations, avoiding the pitfalls. We
Mhm.
we've had some previous conversations about this in an interview format and on a phone conversation. So I'm looking forward to your presentation today and finding out so much more about this subject matter.
Yeah.
As we discuss this for our small business owners who are going to be tuning in. So what I want to do is I'm going to get started and do a welcome. We're going to have folks join us on Facebook, and we're going to have folks coming in on Zoom. But I'm a stickler for starting on time, so I like to start on time. Whoever is here, and folks will, join when they get a chance. But for now, I want to welcome the audience and those who are tuned in on Facebook, those who will come in on Zoom and be with us and join us. I want to thank everybody for being a part of this discussion today. And as we discuss this important topic, how do we legally protect our business operations? How do we protect ourselves, as business owners? Because as business owners, we have a responsibility to protect ourselves. We have a responsibility to protect our operations. It depends upon the business formation, if you have a formation or not. And the liability insurance and understanding contractual agreements and all these other things that goes into operating the legalities of your business or navigating the legalities of your business. So we want to make sure that we're going to cover all that tonight. And we have with us none other than esteemed attorney, licensed here in the state of Georgia, Sandra Jean. And this is part of our National Small Business Week webinar series, the Entrepreneurship and Small Business Summit, which is now virtual. My name is Austin Thompson with Thompson Management Consulting. I am a small business consultant. And for the past 9 years, I have organized and executed an in-person conference and a summit. It was face-to-face with an expo and breakout sessions and keynote speakers and so on and so forth. But when COVID hit in 2020, we went virtual, right? We were meeting at the Busby Center, which is part of the Gwinnett Technical College system. And we were also meeting at Georgia Perimeter Technical College, which is now Georgia State, and meeting in their conference center, as well as DeVry University and so on and so forth. But we're now virtual. We're now on the virtual platform and bringing you the same quality of discussions. Just because we're virtual doesn't mean that the quality has diminished, but we're doing this now on a virtual platform and hoping that you find the same value as you did when we were meeting in person. And the only thing now, we're sitting in the comforts of our home office or while driving, and we're logging in and we're hearing our speakers. National Small Business Week is the week, usually the first week in May, which was legislation passed by the US to recognize the small businesses, our small business leaders, the achievements of our small businesses, and to celebrate entrepreneurship, to celebrate small business advancement, small business operations, small business activity. Because we all know the key driver to the US economy comes from the small businesses, comes from the small business sector, the small to medium-sized enterprises, the mom and pop businesses, the micro enterprises, which creates around 66% of all net jobs, providing disposable income when they are hiring employees. And that disposable income is now spent in the retail shops, the restaurants, the bars, you name it, right? Tax revenue for the cities, the municipalities, for the counties, for the state, federal. So everyone sees, the economic engine driving harder and much more successfully when small businesses are added, to our economy. So this is one of the reasons why Thompson Management Consulting has decided to be a part of the solution and to be a part of the process of advocating for small businesses, advocating for access to capital, advocating for access to resources, and providing educational opportunities for not just our metro area small businesses, but also our local businesses here in Lawrenceville, and for those of you who are joining outside of the state of Georgia, right? So we thank you all, whether it's here on Zoom, whether it's on Facebook Live, we thank you so much for joining us. Today is the third and final presentation in our 3-day webinar series. And, we're definitely thankful for Attorney Jean for joining us to deliver this presentation. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through a few instructions. If you have any questions, if you're joining us on Zoom, if you have questions, please leave that in the chat. Please put your contact information in the chat, because we want to create a space, an opportunity for networking as well between attendees and speakers. If you're on Facebook, please leave your contact information in the Facebook message. I'll read that. If you have questions, also leave that on Facebook, leave that in the chat here on Zoom. So this way, we can make sure to get your questions to our presenter. Also, if you're not speaking, if you would politely just mute your mic, so this way we wouldn't have any background noise, and we can have a really good, effective conversation this evening. So I'm going to go ahead and read the bio for our speaker, and then we'll go right into the presentation and have her deliver or facilitate the conversation. Attorney Sandra L. Jean is the managing founder and CEO of the Jean Consulting Group, LLC. She started the firm after serving for the past 25 years in corporate America as in-house counsel and senior vice president, head of human resources for various healthcare organizations. Prior to that, Sandra was an attorney and compliance specialist with the National Labor Relations Board in Boston. Attorney Jean believes strongly in giving back to her community. She has been a member of the Junior League of Atlanta. She is a founder, past president, and an advisory board member of the Georgia Haitian American Chamber of Commerce. Additionally, Attorney Jean serves as vice president of leadership and is a board member of the Georgia Association of Women Lawyers. Lastly, she is a board and founding member of the Haitian American Lawyers Association of Georgia. The Jean Consulting Group, LLC prides itself in ensuring that small businesses have the same level of access to a highly competent attorney as big corporations do, which is very important, because sometimes we think only the big corporations should have access to the quality that's provided in terms of legal services and business services. But in the Gene consulting firm and consulting group is making sure that small businesses are afforded that same opportunity. We are a cost-saving strategic partner that provides on-demand, cost-effective, and user-friendly risk mitigating resources for business owners. And you can visit the Gene Consulting Group at sandralgene.com to learn more and to schedule a complimentary consultation. And ladies and gentlemen, I just want to welcome you to our presenter for tonight, Sandra Jean, Attorney Jean, and I've known Sandra for quite a while, and I know she is highly competent and highly capable of facilitating this presentation. She's a very serious-minded attorney. She has a big heart for the community and a big heart for the world, for the work that she does. And I know that when you're working with the Gene Consulting Group, you're getting the best value for whatever it costs to consult with her. Sandra Jean.
Thank you, Austin. What a great intro. I really don't have anything else to add except to commend you for the work that you do, because as you stated so eloquently, every year you take the time and you make sure that you're providing resources to small business owners to make sure they can compete and continue to thrive. As you know, statistics show that it takes about 5 years for a small business to ramp up and get to the level that they can sustain themselves, that they are starting to see some equity based on the sweat, blood, and tears that they poured in the business. But statistics also show, unfortunately, that right around the 5 to 6 year mark, that's when these businesses are hit with potentially devastating lawsuits. I've been an attorney since 1997. I've been in big corp, for pretty much a lot of that career after the labor board. And it always pained me to see small businesses where people bring their craft, their skill set, their subject matter expert, all of that can potentially be wiped out right when they deserve the right to enjoy the fruits of their labor. That's when they get those lawsuits. And it makes sense because that's when they're starting to thrive, right? So the two interact, and if you're not prepared, then you can potentially be out of business as a result. So here comes the Gene Consulting Group, and I decided last year to do this full time and make myself available for those that wish to work with me, and also to educate like we're doing tonight, because many people don't know. And so it is our job as leaders to say, hey, here's the information. I do want to acknowledge one of my clients that is on the line. I see level 3 MD is in attendance, and they are a client of mine. And they're doing what they need to do to make sure they protect themselves, as you said, Austin, but also their families. Not to be the doom and gloom queen here, but I think I shared with you a story about a gentleman who called me, who had been in business for about 15 years and has done pretty well for himself, paid off his mortgage, provided for his family, and was actually doing well. Well, as life would have it, he never incorporated the business. He does not deal with contracts. He does not have operating agreement. He does not have insurance. And after 15 years of coasting and making it happen, he got into a pretty devastating car accident, and one of his quote unquote employees was in the car with him. And I said quote unquote because they never formalized the nature of their relationship. But at the time of the accident, the gentleman who was the passenger, because the business owner was driving, was so severely hit that he was on surgery number 3. And his family secured a counsel, an attorney. And the first thing the attorney sent to the business owner is a listing, a request for a listing of all the assets that he owns. And at that time is when this gentleman contacted me to find out if he had any rights. Unfortunately, we were already on notice that he's being potentially served with a lawsuit, he can't do anything. Even insurance wouldn't, it would be post fact, it would be after the fact, it wouldn't cover the insurance, I mean, the accident. And it was painful because he was on the phone, his wife was on the phone, and they were asking me questions like, well, are we at risk of losing our home? Because that's the primary and most substantial asset that they own. And I said, well, if it comes down to that, if they find liability against you, that is an asset that is on the line because you don't have insurance. And there are steps he could have taken by using a trust to protect and insulate his personal assets, but none of that was taken. So that's the reason the work that we do is so important, so that people at least know, have the information, know what resources are out there, and then they can make the decision intelligently as to which way they want to proceed.
Yes, and it's important because you know, like you said, there's no liability coverage, nothing to cover him. And this is where we end up, and we see a lot of small business owners getting into trouble, and mainly your sole proprietors, because they establish a sole proprietorship, but without that liability coverage that the LLC provides, or that a C corp or S corp provides. If you do something, or if something happens in the case of this gentleman here, they can come after your personal assets. You know, they can come
Because
after your personal assets.
there's no separation of where your personal ends and where the business starts. So if it's just one, then of course any attorney would go after all of it to make
Mhm.
sure that their client is made whole. And when you think about that unfortunate set of circumstances I just shared, nobody is ill intent, because the employee passenger was actually severely harmed in the car accident. The owner didn't cause it, but
Right.
nonetheless, he was driving, and you know, he didn't have workers' comp insurance. So we'll talk about all of that. If it's time, I can pull up the PowerPoint, put
Yes,
it on the
please.
screen. Okay.
Yeah, yes, that's not. But I remember us. I was telling Attorney Jean, I was in DC visiting with a few embassies, and we had a conversation. We had this conversation while I was in my Uber heading to one of my meetings, and I said to her, "Ooh, I want you to. I want us to have this conversation again during the presentation, because this is so important, and it's so representative of those of us who are, you know, we're negligent in the fact that we don't take the responsibility to cover ourselves legally. And then when these things happen, then all of a sudden, you know, we end up potentially going bankrupt because now our personal assets are affected." And I'll
Exactly.
let Attorney Jean take it away.
Okay, so this is a few slides and I'll go through them. And if you see questions in the chat or in the Q&A, please bring it to my attention,
I
because
sure will.
I won't be able to monitor both. The first slide is just the top 7 areas that I see that come up quite often, where small business owners need to pay attention before they sign these things. And it's around the leases. And of course, that's for commercial property, real property. Contracts, those contracts could be with either employees, it could be with vendors, it could be with third party subcontractors, but those contracts that need to be put in writing to memorialize the terms of the agreement that you think you've entered into with that that second person. Wills, living will, and trusts. I do not dabble in trust. However, I do work with a network of attorneys. And so what I do not provide, I can refer you to someone within my network that does. But we just talked about the gentleman that got into the car accident and how potentially a trust could have helped them. So we'll go into that later. Loan agreements, and that is mostly for financial agreements, understanding the terms of what you're agreeing to and how it would impact you as well as your business in terms of liquidity, terms of repayment, whether you can accelerate payment or not. Operating agreement, bylaws, articles of incorporation. Again, those are not required in Georgia, because in Georgia, you can just incorporate on the Secretary of State website. It's up to you if you do an operating agreement, but we'll talk about the benefits of having those documents. Employment law issues. I'm a labor and employment attorney, so this is a big area. And I know I talked earlier about statistics and how people get the lawsuits. Your employees are your most risk impact area because they know your business, and what you see is a lot of new business owners will look to their friends, they'll look to family members when they're first putting the company together, and they never really take the time to define the nature of those relationships. And what happened is when someone is starting a company with you, you might consider them an employee. However, they may see themselves as an equal partner in the business. And so as the business is doing well, what you tend to see is them trying to figure out, wait, how do I get my share of the pie? So we'll talk about those. And then lastly, but not least, insurance, because insurance can make the difference between whether you stay in business or not, because we live in a very litigious society. There's more likelihood that you will be sued than not. And another interesting set of statistics I found is that, believe it or not, Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia are the top 3 states where employees tend to sue their employers. They lead the nation, those 3 states in that order. So Georgia is number 3 in the nation. So you do want to make sure you understand the landscape so that you can protect yourself. So leases, I won't get into it too much. I will highlight the areas that I think you need to pay attention. I have 3 slides on leases because those can be quite voluminous and contain a lot of terms that people just kind of browse over and just get to the top, the last page and sign, or get to the bottom of the page and initial, like they usually tell you. But you want to look at rent increases. You want to look at security deposit. You want to look at the length of the lease and how easy it is for you to get out if you needed to get out. You need to look at things like option to purchase. Because option to purchase, you sometimes, especially in commercial real estate, you might spend a lot of money putting the place to your standards, what you want it to be. If you're a hairdresser, you make some modifications, and now all of a sudden, it's looking like better than when you first leased it. And if you don't sure that there's option to purchase in there, all that money you invested in the property that you don't own could potentially just go to the lessor, and you walk away with nothing after years. So you want to pay attention to those as well. Improvement, I just talked about that. If you made upgrades to the space, who's responsible for those costs? Because they might add value to the property. And if you're paying for the cost, but then you don't get to enjoy the value added, you just made a bad business decision. Make sure you understand all the terms in the commercial lease. If it's overwhelming, I always say to people, if you think the money I ask you up front is a lot of money, wait until you have to litigate that document. It's definitely, I can guarantee you, it's 100% more expensive to litigate than to have an attorney review it on the front end, make sure you're comfortable with it, and make sure that it reflects all the terms of the agreement you think you're entering into. Also, extension to the agreement so that you can prepare yourself if you needed one. Who gets to pay the taxes? A lot of times, the owner, the property owner, will want to load the tenant, the small business owner, with all the taxes and insurance and all of that. And that could be okay as long as you know to negotiate and make sure you understand you're taking those extra costs on. Same thing with obligation for repair. Who's in charge if there's a leak? Because again, you don't own the property. How much money are you willing to invest in the property without you owning it? And what does that look like? You want clarity on the front end. What happens if the property gets condemned, which doesn't happen a lot, but can happen. So you want to, again, be prepared to have those clauses reviewed. Rent abatement, if something were to happen. We had COVID. No one expected COVID. So what was the language in the lease, if you had a lease, that would protect you against having to pay full lease or the full rent, even though you can't use the place. So you need to make sure that those covenants are in there and that you have a level of comfort with the language before you sign it. Now we'll get into contracts. Contracts are a little different, but the lease is also considered a contract. There are several types of contracts: employment contracts for, usually it's your high level employees that you would get an employment contract with. Partnership agreements. I've worked with as many as 7 people wanting to open a business. You want to make sure that you have a partnership agreement in place showing exactly what people brought, whether in terms of cash or property, to the venture. You want to delineate the role. How do you make decision? Who owns what within the business? All of that are contained in a potential partnership agreement. Sales contract, PO contracts, purchase orders, service contracts, warranty contracts, joint venture agreements, which we don't see a lot of in the small sector, but it may come up if you're seeking financing from a venture capitalist and they want to own part of the business. That may come into play. An option contract. So all these contracts are things to think about. And if they come up during the term of your interaction with a potential partner or third party, you want to make sure that you get a competent attorney like myself to go ahead and review these before you sign them. Next, I have, just a little bit on contracts. And I don't know, a lot of people know this, but for a contract to be binding and enforceable, there are some required elements that must be present. There must be an offer. There must be an acceptance. There must be an awareness of what it is that you're entering into. So similar to the leases I went over, you have to have an awareness of what are the clauses that are contained in the contract so that you can consider them and whether they're in your best interest to enter into those terms as presented to you. You also need to have the capacity to enter into a contract. If I'm 93 and I don't even recognize my children, but I'm signing a contract, I can challenge that contract based on the basis that he did not or she did not have the capacity to enter into such a contract because obviously they're, suffering from some sort of dementia. And of course, legality. Some people will put language in a contract that is not necessarily legal. I see that a lot in the dry cleaning business. When you get the receipt, they put all kind of language about how they're not responsible for damages to your clothes or tires or whatever you entrust them with. And that is a complete bull, because if you can show that there was no damage and they damaged it, you certainly would be entitled to some kind of make whole remedy. So those are the things that an attorney usually look for when we go through the contract to make sure these things are present. Now, one thing I will say is that in Georgia, especially the courts do engage in what they call blue pencil, where if the contract is substantively whole and good enough, they might take out provisions that are problematic, but keep the validity of the contract so that businesses can continue to operate and you don't have to completely invalidate the contract. So just something to keep in mind. Any questions before I go into wills and trusts?
All right, trying to unmute my mic. Oh man. Okay, so great information. Contracts and agreements. What differentiates one from the other?
Really, a contract, they're the same. They're used interchangeably. A contract, people use that mostly when they're dealing with someone they don't know. So you enter into a contract with a bank. It could be an agreement even, but you enter into a contract with maybe a subcontractor. But it's the same thing. There's got to be a meeting of the mind around certain key elements that need to be present, and that there's a what they call a quid pro quo. So
Mhm.
there's an offer of certain things. I understand what you're offering to me. I looked them over, I considered them, they're in my benefit. I was not coerced to enter into it, and I accepted the terms of the contract. So whether you call it contract or agreement, really, they're interchangeable.
Okay, and they can have similar components, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And then you mentioned business owners who hire family. You can hire family. It could be a sorrow or a frat brother, and a good friend. And they automatically think, like you said, that they're partners in the business.
Yeah.
Is it wise for some sort of a contract to be drafted up between the owner and the family members, frat brothers, sorrow that they're hiring into the business?
Yes. I'll give you another example because I'm full of them. So one day maybe I'll write a book. So I had a call by this young lady. She is actually in her late 20s, and she decided 5 years ago, again, the magic number seems to be right about 5 to 6 years.
Mhm.
She decided that she was going to enter into this company. She was going to form the company. She reached out to her friend, and the friend was right there with her. She does not deny it. Uh, at some point, she had the friend move in with her, but they did everything together. They traveled together, and now she's being sued by that same friend.
Hmm.
What led to the lawsuit is because they're at year 5. The company is now doing quite well for itself. They survived COVID. They came out the other side, and the friend is looking like she's still getting an hourly pay, and she's not, to her, and from her perspective, enjoying in the growth of the company that, again, from her perspective, that she helped put together.
Mhm.
When I asked the business owner who called me, I said, well, why do you feel she's not entitled to anything? Because I always like to find out what it's like, what they're thinking. And she said, well, she lived with me. She didn't pay me any rent. And even though she feels like she stayed up late with me, I paid her quite generously when I could,
Mhm.
even when I didn't, when I went without getting paid, because she always felt the other lady was more of an employee. If
Mhm.
anybody's not going to eat, it's going to be her as the owner. Unfortunately, the other one said, well, yes, you did pay me, but I still was up with you at night. I was almost like an owner. And it's not fair that now that the company is doing well, that you didn't pay me. There was no contract. So it's people's words against each other. And there was no record keeping even as to how many hours this lady was working. One thing we'll talk about when we get to employment law is that as a small business owner, if you're paying someone by the hour and they don't have a certain salary and you can't demonstrate they're in a 1099, then you have to keep a record per the Fair Labor Standards Act of how many hours they work. And this lady didn't keep any of that. So it's just very messy if you don't make sure that you're looking at just preventing lawsuits. And we'll
Yeah,
get into that a little bit more when I get to that slide.
yeah, I can see how sticky that is because if oh, yeah, we've been good friends since college days. We were roomed together all 4 years. We played sports together, hung out. We dated together. Here we are. We're 20 years later. We're
We
best friends.
cried together.
Yeah, and we cried together, laughed together. I want to hire you. Into my business. I want to hire you as a customer service rep, right? To handle my customer service and marketing. And so that's a case, that's a situation where I can see where they might not think about a formal agreement or something like that between the two, but there should be something in place if that is the case.
And that is the thing. And the requirements now, of course, with the government leaning left, and it's not to talk politics, it depends on whether you have Trump in office who's like, oh, let the people do what they want and, build the economy. And then you have the left wingers that are more like, no, we need to protect people against themselves.
Yeah.
And so then you see more liberal application of the regulations. And
Hmm.
so things that you could get away with under maybe the more conservative branch of government, you don't get away with that when it's more the Democrats leading.
Right.
And so, they look at things like how many employees did you have? Are you engaged in interstate commerce? The problem is those requirements are being lowered and lowered every day. Interstate commerce, if you use a phone and you call a company or you purchase from Amazon, that's engaging in interstate commerce. So you can easily meet those requirements. But of course, if you had that allegation, the best thing is to contact an attorney so they can look into the facts of your specific company and advise you accordingly.
Okay. All right. Great. I have two more, but I'll let you go ahead and I can ask them at the end.
Okay. So wills and trusts, there are a number of ways that you can definitely structure your business. The most popular ones we talked about are sole proprietorships, partnerships, companies, and trust, believe it or not, is also an entity because it can hold property to the benefit of certain beneficiaries. Each one of them has advantages and disadvantages. Like I said in the opening, I don't get into the trust because I'm not a trust attorney. But one thing I always say to my clients, I say, whether you have the money now or later, it's always cheaper to save that money. Make sure you talk to one of the attorneys in my network so that you can engage in asset protection. Because the trust, number one, bypasses probate. So you don't have to have it probated in court. But it also allows you to pass generational wealth without being taxed. Because you keep it in that entity with certain terms that the attorney will put in place for you, and you're protected, and you know that it can survive. Now, we'll get into operating agreements. I talked about that a little bit earlier. With the operating agreement, everybody knows LLC stands for Limited Liability Company. And it's the most popular structure for small businesses really in the US. It provides small businesses with protection from liability. And so a lot of people love it. But it's always important to have the operating agreement. And the reason I say that is it does a number of things for the business owner. It's an internal document, so it's not something you need to file with anybody. It's documents that are kept internally, and you can upgrade them as needed. Sorry, I'm noticing my battery for my computer is dwindling, so I'm gonna
Just had that same problem.
Okay, I just charged it, but it's a set of internal documents that you can review and update as needed among the parties that are leading the company. So it's not something you're set into forever, but what it does is it identifies the company. It clarifies who owns what within the company. It defines the roles and duties and responsibilities of each member of the company. And it also lays out structural features. So you can put in your operating agreement, if you become incapacitated for 2 months or more, these are the things that I want to happen in my business. If you don't do that, somebody can petition the court and the judge will say, what happens to your company. So I always say you don't want that. You do not want somebody who's not you to say this is what's going to happen to your company. We want everybody to become billionaires and live a long, healthy lives. Unfortunately, sometimes life happens. And so what if you die? What happens to your company? If you don't have an operating agreement, again, that the judge will determine based on testimony from interested parties what's going to happen to your company. And I always say to people, even if you don't do it at the time you're incorporating, within a couple of years of having the business, please make sure you have an operating agreement. And I have listed on the screen 4 ways an operating agreement can benefit the business. It strengthens your corporate veil, meaning you can show if you keep a separate bank account and you're not, commingling money between yourself and the company, you can show that it is its own entity, like the gentleman I talked about in the beginning that was concerned about his house. If he had an LLC, they could sue the company and possibly go after assets held by the company, but his home would have been protected. It solidifies central agreements between members because it's in writing. It defines key business procedures such as how money is to be held, who makes decision about money above a certain amount, who owns what, who's the tiebreaker if people can't agree on things. So just key business procedures that you can anticipate. And again, remember, you can update this agreement at any time. So it's a great way to clarify who does what and what happens to what if something were to happen. And then the last one is it keeps state default laws at bay. And by that, I mean the judge basically saying, well, since you don't have an operating agreement, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. So now, before I get into employment contracts or agreements, any other questions?
I don't have any. I don't know if any of our
Okay.
attendees have. I don't see any on Facebook as yet.
Okay, perfect.
All right.
I want to make sure I stay aware of your time. So I'll go ahead with employment contracts. So employee rights are pervasive. The employees are well protected. We have several agencies that make sure that employers do the right thing by employees. You have the EEOC that is vested with ensuring that employers maintain a workplace environment that are free of discrimination or harassment or just hostility overall, and can retaliate if someone were to exercise their rights under Article 7, which is the Civil Rights Act of 1964, that says basically you can't harass, you can't discriminate, or nor can you retaliate against someone if they raise the claim under certain key things that are protected, such as age, race, national origin, sexual orientation, religion, etc. You also have OSHA, which is vested with ensuring that employers keep a good and fair working and safe workplace for employees, because prior to OSHA being there and having those laws, it wasn't uncommon for employees to die on the job because there was no focus on safety. Then you have the Department of Labor, which is vested with enforcing a number of regulatory acts, such as the Fair Labor Standards Act that oversees overtime if someone works a certain number of hours per week, namely 40, that you're supposed to pay them. They also look into whether you're classifying employees properly. A lot of employers want to claim that everybody is a 1099, and that doesn't do anything for the government. Uncle Sam doesn't get his share when people are classified as 1099, because when they are W-2s, you have to pay taxes. They have to pay taxes. Some of it goes to Social Security, but none of that comes into play the same way when they're W-2s. And then you have the right to unionize if they're employees. That's overseen by the National Labor Relations Board. So like I said, a number of regulatory acts that are at play all the time to make sure that employees' rights are protected. So as a business owner, I always encourage them to have handbooks and policies. Also, with some key employees, you want to have employment agreements. And then when you're letting employees go, especially again, key employees, you want to make sure you have a severance agreement, because you can, again, remember there's an offer, there's an acceptance, there are terms that are beneficial to both parties. All of that would be laid out in these agreements to make sure that both parties are protected, and it lessens the need to have a lawsuit to understand how people can be protected. I'll go back to handbooks and policies. I see a lot of small business owners don't really pay attention to having handbooks and policies. And the reason for that is, of course, they do not understand the number of laws that are at play at any time. And so they think it's a nice to have, but not a required. And I will say to you, in defending certain claims, such as the ones I referenced before, the handbook is actually exhibit number 1. If you have your expectations codified in a document that you educate your employees, even if you just have a few employees, and you say, listen, if you feel discriminated, these are the things I expect from you to do. This is how you report it. This is the courts in the trial of fact, even if we don't get to court, put a lot of weight on these things because they understand at least you've gone out of your way to make sure that you have steps in your agreements and your handbooks that people are on notice, and you have a better argument to say, well, Your Honor, before we get to a lawsuit, there are things we have that we can protect against this type of behavior, but the employee didn't bring it to my attention so I can remedy it. And I can assure you, unless it's egregious, the courts will say to the employee, well, your lawsuit is premature. You didn't follow these steps that the employer put in place. I want you to go do that and then consider, whether you have a valid claim or not. So those are things that protect employers that the general run-of-the-mill, your average person may not know about, that it's good to, at some point, really for them to keep a list of things that I may not be able to do it in year one of me launching the company because the money is not there yet, but I need to keep it in the back of my mind that I want to get that done sooner than later.
Right. And I think what it is that, like, again, your micro enterprises, right? Your 2, 3, 5 person operation, they might not think that it's important to have one,
Exactly.
and this is where I guess this, and earlier today, I chaired a panel and we discussed some of these things. There should be like a checklist, right?
Yeah.
That
Mhm.
small businesses have.
That's something, yeah.
Yeah, if you
That.
go to the SBDC's office, the Small Business Development Center,
Mhm.
right, or the SBA, or a local chamber, or a business association or alliance, and they say, hey, I'm starting a business. I want to make
Right.
sure I do everything right. I want to make sure I do my due diligence when I'm starting this business. I need a checklist of all the things I need to have in place. And I think these are some of the questions that are not posed to these organizations.
And that's the reason I went in. So you see this PowerPoint, I've used it over and over, and I think it's pretty, it doesn't have all the language that I'm putting as I'm building it. But one of the things I'm working on is putting these things on my website for easy downloadable so that people at least understand, okay, there's a place, a platform I can go to that I would get all that information. And like you and I just said, Austin, they may not be able to do it all in year one,
Right.
but there are certain ones that need to be done in year one. And I'm on that slide right now. I would not advise anybody, if you do not have the money to get insurance, don't go in business. You're not ready.
Right.
I mentioned that I have a client of mine on the call, level 3 MD, they do cybersecurity. If I were to tell you how many companies I deal with that are sharing their clients' information, personal information willy-nilly, and I'm like, oh Lord, they may not be aware of the Fair Credit Reporting Act that basically requires that you keep certain information encrypted so that it doesn't fall under, because people get hacked all the time.
Yeah.
And so if they have access to your date of birth and social security, pretty much they can open an account under your name. So that type of information is, data privacy and cybersecurity to prevent against hacking, definitely needed depending on what business you're in and how much information you're collecting on people. And, my client is on the line. That's what they provide. Business insurance, you have general liability, you have professional liability, you have E&O. Those every company should have, because errors and omission, I tell people I'm a darn good attorney, but guess what? To err is human. So I may make a mistake or I may omit something because it never came up and I couldn't anticipate for it. Right now, all I have to worry about is to pay my deductible, because I have a solid bulletproof E&O policy that I know if something were to happen, my insurance company would step in and take over for me. I was supporting a gentleman who had a claim, and he did the right thing. He bought a multi-million-dollar policy and he was sued And he brought me in months into the lawsuit. And the first thing I asked him, I said, well, do you have professional and general liability insurance? And he pulled it out and said, yes. And I said, well, did you notify them that a suit was filed against you? He never did. He didn't know that the reason he has these insurance policies is to help him in the case, that he gets sued. And I tried to do it for him, but unfortunately there's a time requirement to file your notice. And clearly he was outside of those time requirements, and they denied it, not because they couldn't cover the claim, but
Right.
because he did not contact them within the time required so that he would put them on notice that he was, being sued. So it's not even having the insurance, it's also understanding once you have the insurance that once you have a potential claim, read your policy or make sure you have a good relationship with your insurance broker so that you understand the terms of that policy.
That's good.
Workers' comp, again, is if you have employees, you want to make sure you have workers' comp. I have a client that I had to let go because she just kept hiring people, but she kept thinking she doesn't need workers' comp. And I kept telling her one lawsuit will wipe out her business because it's worth it. The workers' comp tends to be pricey, but imagine if you don't pay the policy and they sue you personally. Which one do you want to deal with? So the premium can get broken down into monthly payments so that you can afford it, versus if someone won against you, because again, accidents happen. Workers' comp come into play if someone alleges that they were hurt on the job while they were working for you. So you don't know when that's gonna happen. Sometimes it's soft tissue, soft muscle that it's not like a broken arm. If the person said, oh my God, I pulled the muscle because I was moving a box for you, very often those are soft tissue, muscle injury. You can't see it. So the doctor's gonna give them a note that said, yeah, they're subject to you paying for them because they're injured on the job.
Right.
And so you wanna prevent for that. And then of course, if you have a partnership or even for you, they have directors and officers insurance so that if they make a decision, because directors and officers tend to be fiduciaries of the company. So if they violate their fiduciary duties by making decisions that were not in the benefit, and mostly if they have shareholders or other investors, they could be personally at risk for decisions they make. So you want to make sure you insure those people so that if in fact there's a problem, they can enjoy the benefit and the protection of an insurance policy.
Great.
And of course, commercial auto, and then the umbrella policy. Again, I'm not an insurance broker. The Georgia Haitian American Chamber of Commerce has plenty of insurance brokers. I think the next Commerce Works, they do a monthly event. It's gonna be May 10th. You can see it on our website or on our Facebook page. And they're actually gonna cover the different types of insurance to consider, as well as how important that relationship with your insurance broker is, so that God forbid something were to happen, you can have that already, that relationship established so they can help you navigate that quagmire.
Can you kindly give me that website, the Haitian
Yes.
Chamber?
Yes, it's www.hcci.org.
www.h.
No, GA, like
GA.
Georgia.
Okay, GA.
HCCI.org.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So with that being said, they can also always, I always say, if you were to Google Georgia Haitian Chamber, we come right up. We are the only chamber. So that's another easy way to remember if you didn't, if you can't remember all the acronym. Georgia Haitian Chamber, we're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn, we're everywhere. So, but with that being said, this is a big overview, and I noticed we're almost at the top of the hour, but we covered a lot. And it's really, again, to your point, Austin, keeping in mind that checklist, what are some of the things I need to consider, and coming up with a roadmap or a timetable as to when you're gonna address these, so that you can make sure you can sleep at night and not be one lawsuit away from losing everything that you worked hard for.
Right. And I thank you for that. A couple of things I want to just go over. Like with the employment contracts, right? So and I want to be careful how I say this, but the way in which individuals identify themselves nowadays, because we have, people who are being hired consider themselves, binary, non-binary,
Right.
those who are part of the LGBTQ, and I think there's an I,
Yes, and a few more after
and
that.
two
Yeah.
more. Right,
Mhm.
right.
Yeah.
How has that changed in the way in which companies handle employment contracts to make sure that, they're exercising proper inclusion and equity, and also being fair to those that they're hiring, that there's no discrimination?
Well, that's a very good question, because I get that a lot, and
Mhm.
especially people that are concerned more so with those types of people are getting more protection. And really, when you look at the act, it was designed not to add to the employer's plate, but really to protect the people. So if you treat everybody accordingly, so in your policies, you have the required language that says we do not discriminate because we treat all employees the same way, you're protected. And really, that's all you need. It's to also have in place for your workers clear steps on what to do if they felt that they were discriminated, because you don't want to maintain a work environment where people are coming to work and they feel like the odd person, and people are making jokes that
Yeah,
clearly are in bad taste, but people are like, it was a joke. No.
right.
In fact, the law says it doesn't matter how you intended it, it's how the person receives it that
Mhm.
matters. And
Right.
so it's a subjective standard that the courts look at when they're assessing whether there was in fact discrimination or harassment due to one of those categories. So it's actually easy, is to make sure that you have clear policies in your handbook, that you
Mhm.
do not tolerate discrimination or harassment of any type, and that if anybody were to feel a certain way, these are the steps they need to take so that they can make sure management knows about this incident. That's pretty much what you need. The only time, and I try to post about these cases on my LinkedIn page, so anybody can see my name on the on the PowerPoint. Look me up on LinkedIn, and Sandra L. I try to post, and I post to see how every time there's a finding against the employer. Now, granted, the higher levels may never know about it, but the
Mhm.
managers and the supervisors knew, and dismissed it and said, oh, you're too soft, you're such a snowflake. People love to
Mhm.
use that word, and
Yeah,
grow a backbone, oh, you're so sensitive. And that's when the companies get in trouble.
yeah,
So this brings the point that it's not just about whether you as the owner knows. You want to make sure that you train your employees and your managers, if you have any, so that they don't dismiss things because they don't think it's that egregious and that important.
right. Because I can see where small businesses might leave themselves more vulnerable,
They do.
yeah,
They
than
do.
bigger corporations, because they have the team of attorneys,
And
at their disposal,
HR.
and HR.
Yeah.
As a small business enterprise really can't afford to have a legal team and an HR and so on and so forth. You know,
Right. And that's why I came up with the fractional. That's why I said, okay, if I were to make this happen, what business structure do I need to have? How do I make sure? Because you read in my bio, the whole purpose and the objective of creating this company is to make sure that they have access to a competent attorney as if they were a big corporation. So
mhm,
they have me on smaller retainer for quick access, or
mhm,
they can just use me as needed, But I always encourage, if you can't afford a retainer, I can make it easy so that you can just have that quick access to me if a question were to come up. And then you don't feel like every time you come to me, it's gonna be a legal bill because, better to prevent, what do they say? An ounce of prevention is worth a ton of remedy.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And that's good because at least with the retainer, they can always, leverage you and leverage your expertise, and protect them. So have the protection that they need,
exactly.
and have the
And I get to
protection.
know their business. It's not a one-off. It's like we become partners. I can help you with a phone call, with a text or whatever, to say, hey, what's going on with so and so? We talked about it, last month. Did it flare up? Did you follow up and not just sit on it? And then
Mhm.
a year later, something happens and it's like, oh my God, you didn't do anything for a year. You didn't follow up. You didn't do certain things that show that you address the situation. So now it leaves you more exposed than if you had stayed in touch with me and we managed it over time.
Right, right. I got a couple more questions, but I want to open up the floor to anyone who's listening here on Zoom. If you have a question, you can please unmute your mic and ask a question. I see a hand raised. Yes.
So mine is more of a comment. By the way, Attorney Jane, awesome job. Great content. The only comment that I had when it comes, I know we talked about insurance, is when it comes to cybersecurity insurance, if you are getting security insurance, make sure you comply with the questionnaire that they sent over to you. Now, if you have a claims, I've seen it all the times, right? If you say you're doing X, Y, Z, you have to do X, Y, Z. Other than that, if you're out of compliance with the questionnaire, I do see claims get denied. So just wanted to throw that out there. But other than that, awesome content. I love it.
Thank you. No, actually, Wilson, you bring up a very good point because that goes for the same as errors and omission, professional liability. For example, myself, one of the reasons I'm very clear about what I do and what I don't do is because when I'm filling out the questionnaire, they ask me what area of the law do you practice in? Because if I do PI or certain others, it's going to be higher than if I'm doing employment, HR, business, those are low-key, low-risk areas versus others. So if I were to dabble, because 1 month I'm hungry and I'm like, you know what, I'm going to take this divorce case. If something were to happen, the insurance company can say on the questionnaire, I did not disclose that I do divorce. Therefore, they'll cover everything else that I checked off, but they will not cover that one area that I left empty and now that I'm engaged in. So that's the reason I say to people when they call me and like, can you help me with housing? Can you help me with this? I say, I can do contract, I can do labor, I can do employment, I can do business, but I don't do certain things, not because I couldn't, because it was on the bar, but because I chose not to and I didn't disclose it on my professional liability insurance.
Right, right. I want to ask Mr. Wilson a question. Cybersecurity insurance, is this for any type of infraction on the network system or insurance that a business owner would take out to protect them from any type of virus or intrusion on the system?
Yes, to protect themselves and their clients,
And their
right?
clients.
So, right. So if they have a claim, so let's just say a system got hacked, right? And personal identifiable information got, disclosed, and there's a lot of things that comes when that happens. So there's forensics, there's all these different third parties that you have to get involved. That's what the insurance cover really in the business. So the business owner don't get hit with with the whole bill, like Attorney Jean mentioned earlier. If you don't have these things, then they're gonna start looking at your personal assets and things of that nature. So it's a part of the what I call risk management.
Mhm.
That's exactly what we help our clients with.
And I can see where this is important for tax preparers, financial advisors, where it's social security numbers and addresses, taking doctors' offices for medical records and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Actually, there's a law from the FTC. The deadline is June 6th for some of the entities you just mentioned that they have to comply with those safeguards. We're talking about tax preparers, CPAs, any non-banking financial institutions. There is actually an FTC safeguard rule that you can look up that actually apply to them starting June 6th is the deadline, or June 9th, one of those days.
Right, right. It's the importance of doing the due diligence and taking these things seriously. You know.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Wilson, thank you so much for your contribution. Anyone else? Anyone else? I see a lot of folks following on Facebook. I see no questions. Thanks, Miss Carmen. Miss Carmen was our speaker last night. Retirement and investments. And I see she's making several comments. Her question was asked a while ago, so we got that covered. I think she wants to know if it's okay. Okay, so she's asking a question about 1099, but I think you covered that. The discussion on the 1099.
What was the question she asked?
Can you type in Miss Carmen, can you type in your question? And this way, I know she said the question was answered.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, but I've got one. I'll wait for her to type it in, but I have one here. As far as lease agreements, right? Because I know a lot of people got messed up in 2020 and 2021 where they just didn't have, the overhead, the money to cover overhead costs, pay the rent and utilities and so on and so forth. And they were really begging their landlords to give them a break. I know COVID has changed a lot, right? Especially when it comes to leases. And how much has the pandemic has changed legal agreements between tenants and landlords? And now that we're past the pandemic, how much leeway or flexibility have you seen tenants having with landlords when it comes to lease agreements?
So as I stated, I'm not a real property attorney. We do have those in my network that do real estate and that type of law. But I will share this with you. One of the things I know about Georgia is they take contracts literally to the word of the contract. Georgia will look at the terms of your lease and say, well, whatever's in that lease is what they'll hold you accountable for. When I practiced in Massachusetts, they were more inclined to include equity type, what's fair, what's equitable type of remedies in dealing with contracts. Georgia is not as flexible at all. So my only advice to business owners, again, is to make sure that you read it. If anything jumps at you that doesn't feel good, you may not know per se that it's not good, contact an attorney. Even if you contact me, I'll put you in touch with a real estate attorney that can give you the trend and what they see is happening in that area. But again, the biggest problem is people are not even aware of what they're signing, because these contracts tend to be very overwhelming. They're in small print. There's a lot of language. Some of it is repeated. And any broker you're dealing with tell you, oh, it's a standard contract, just initial at the bottom. All you have to worry about is pretty much the price. That's what the people focus on. How much am I gonna pay? But they don't look at all these. That's why I took my time and made sure, if you notice, leases are the one that I took 3 slides for, because those can really become convoluted. They can include a lot of legalese that if you're not an attorney, the language is heavy. It's not your plain English type of in your face language. So you read it, you're like, huh? It has 5 clauses and or 5 phrases in one sentence, and you're like, it's just, it can be overwhelming. So what I say is take the time. Take the time to read it, make sure you understand what you're signing, because in Georgia, once the landlord presents that document to the judge, more than likely, the judge will enforce it.
Yeah, I was called out to someone who just signed a lease on a retail space, and really just signed a lease without even negotiating anything with the landlord. And now she's literally expensing herself with having to put up walls and change
Yeah.
walls, and and I mean, basically, I'm not an attorney, so I don't provide legal advice. I do provide phone numbers to folks who I know in the construction space, so I know somebody who can put up walls for you. But yeah, I see it a lot, and even in the city, we see where people, they sign leases and they purchase property without even checking the zonings,
Yeah.
and we discussed that earlier in the panel today, with the city. So, we see a lot of decisions being made, and I would like to implore anyone listening, before you sign anything, before you put your signature on any document, think first, hey, did I really fully understand it? Am I doing, myself any justice here? And if you have anybody in the legal field, contact Sandra Jean, contact a licensed attorney. I don't know what it costs to review contracts and leases and so on and so forth, but get a quote. And again, it's less expensive to have somebody look at it than now, because now this young lady could have had an attorney look at her agreement, could have had a better understanding of her agreement, and not have to now go into her cash, her personal cash flow, and now have these walls put up. So a lot of decisions are made, a lot of signatures are placed on contracts without people really fully understanding what it is that they're signing.
And the good news, Austin, is that everything is negotiable.
Mhm.
Honestly, you don't have to sign it until you go back and forth and show that, look, I'm aware of this provision. I have a question about it. I need you to explain to me exactly what this means, and then ask for clarification. But
Yeah.
what happened is people that, especially new business owners, they just want that key. They're
Yeah.
so excited. They
Yeah.
just want to move forward. They're told everybody, oh my God, I'm getting a place. I can set up. I'll have a front, store unit, and then they get caught up, and it's not until, like your friend that has to do the repairs.
Yeah.
Okay, you do the repairs, and then the owner can accelerate the lease and kick you out. Like, what? I signed a 3-year lease. You're asking me to leave, but you didn't read the provision that said they can accelerate the lease at any time. And so you just spent all that money, and now they give you notice that they need you out, which happens all the time.
So you just renovated that person's space.
I
You just
know.
spent your money to renovate that landlord's space.
Yeah. And
so
now they're gonna kick you out so they can rent it out to somebody else and make more money.
yes.
And it happens,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
It's unfortunate. So I got Miss Carmen's question here. Does the handbook severance and other rules apply to 1099 people? If not, what should you do for 1099 people?
That's a great question. So the handbook applies normally to W-2s, but you can certainly have a set of policies and procedures for all employees, regardless of status, because at the end of the day, they are representing you when they go out, and you may have certain expectations of them. So just because they're 1099s don't mean you can't have a set of rules and policies. And I would even recommend that you do, because even though they're 1099, they're still protected by many of the laws that I mentioned. They just wouldn't be protected by things like Fair Labor Standards Act, because they're not technically your employee. They're not subject to overtime. but they would still be subject to, let's say, OSHA sometimes crosses the line because you have to have a place that is safe for even your 1099s to come in. Same thing with some other laws. So yeah, it doesn't hurt. If your 1099 were to go and they felt harassed by even your partners or other vendors, they need to understand what are the steps they need to take if they are in that situation. So just because they are 1099 doesn't mean they're not protected against discrimination or harassment because they're gay or they're old or they're Black or they're Haitian, you know, national origin and all of that. So it is always recommended to put as much as you can in writing because that will be your first exhibit against any claim to show that not only you have policies, you clearly took the time to make sure they were in place and you educated your either subcontractors or your employees on those policies and they failed to follow the steps because that's really your best defense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And for a 1099, should it be, I mean, hiring someone on a W-2 over contracting someone with a 1099, is there a threshold or a point where an employee should say, okay, I'm going to hire you on a WW2 on a W-2 rather than a 1099? Because I know there's some legalities to that too.
Yes, there are. And so it's very fact sensitive. If the Department of Labor gets involved, and they've been going after a lot of people because during the pandemic, a lot of people lost their jobs, and guess what they did? Small businesses went up by like 63% or something, and more so in Georgia because they tend to lead. But people opened their businesses and they hired everybody, even law firms. At one point, again, on LinkedIn is where I post a lot about these things. So be sure to follow me because I love to just post about these. The DOL has been having a field day. Under Trump, he cut their funding. So if you remember, Trump was still in office towards the end of the pandemic, and then Biden came in power. When Biden came in, he refunded all these agencies. And it was like, okay, they're hiring 130 new agents to just go look at companies and make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do. So W-2s essentially is anyone that you hire and you tell them what to do, how to do it, and when to do it. You know, it's not just, okay, Sandra, I bring you on board and I need you to just give me a separation agreement. Can you get it to me by Friday? I'm talking about those assistants that you hire that are entry level, that are not professionals, that you direct, you give them their laptop, you give them everything they need, you tell them what needs to be done, and they have to clock in or something. You keep a big thing that people do is they hire you as 1099, but then they want you to clock in and out. They monitor every hour and they treat you as if you're a W-2, but then they're like, oh, no, but you're a 1099. Well, guess what the Department of Labor does? If you're on the fence, which way do you think they're gonna lean? And on the side of the W-2. For the reason that I stated before, 1099s are independent contractors. The employer pays them a flat fee. They're not paying taxes. They're not paying FICA. They're not paying Medicare. They're not paying into Social Security. And Uncle Sam does not like that because we have baby boomers that are coming of age and need their Social Security money. And we're so, I hate to put it this way, but it's true, as a government, we do not manage money well. So the way they're paying out is by people putting in to the system. There's no real reserve. At one point, there was a big thing about, you know, there's so many Gen Xers, I mean, so little of us, the Gen Xers, that there's not enough of us putting into the system to cover the baby boomers that are retiring and the silent generation before them that retired, because people are living longer. You know, you have people now that are in their 90s, 100, and these people might have retired at 60, meaning the government is paying 45 years out. So they're like, oh my God, we're running out of money. So now you get the millennials that are all about opening their businesses, not necessarily wanting to work. These people are not necessarily, they all want to be like Trump. They all want to be like Jeff Bezos. We don't want to pay taxes because if these guys can do it, why can't we, right?
Yeah.
So there's that shortfall between them paying into the system and how much the government has to pay out to these people that are living longer and more beautiful lives and that want to collect their Social Security. And so the DOL is coming down like crazy on companies saying, look, you misclassified your people, so now you owe this much money. And we're talking about settlements, but there's six-figure settlements that these companies have to pay because they misclassified their workers.
Right, right. And I can see, I mean, but because the 1099 individual is still out, or the contractor is still obligated to pay his or her own taxes, you know, that the company isn't paying. So I guess there's a delayed payment with the government, you know, which they, of course, Uncle Sam don't like, but.
But also remember, 1099s can take out their phones, they can take out supplies, they can take out mileage because they're their own business. When you're a W-2, you pay taxes on what they pay you. And your phone is your personal expense, your supply is your personal. So it is more advantageous in this country to be a business owner than it is to be a W-2. And this is where you have this dichotomy, if you will, because the government makes its money with W-2s, but they set up the IRS so that it's more advantageous to be a business owner. So that's why the Republicans are like, we need to revamp the IRC, the revenue code, because it doesn't make sense the way it is now. Let's just simplify it and say, regardless of whatever, everybody pays a certain amount of tax instead of this convoluted internal revenue code that nobody can really make sense of. But you have the super rich people that hire an army of CPAs and attorneys, and they find every loophole and they have to pay taxes legally.
So who's benefiting from the change in the codes? The 1099 and contractors?
At this point, I can tell you, I would say it's probably both the company and the individual, but it doesn't do anything for the system that we operate within. So the employer gets to have a linear line item that says, okay, I'm gonna pay Wilson $1,500 a week, and that's it. I don't have to worry about anything else. And Wilson is like, I'm getting my $1,500, but I probably have $1,500 worth of expenses as well.
Right.
So I don't have to pay taxes. And the government's like, whoa, 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 this doesn't work for me.
Right. Yeah, that's understandable. And I just want, we got about 5 minutes left, 5 to 6 minutes left. Are there any other questions? Any other questions? We got the one off Facebook. I see a lot of people watching on Facebook. So you're popular on Facebook. You're just not popular with questions, you know? Anybody want to ask questions here on Zoom? You know, but I just want to ask, you spent a lot of years in corporate, in this field, in the legal field. What inspired you to start your own business, to be an independent legal consultant and start your own business?
Great question. So I actually incorporated the company in 2014 because it's always been a dream of mine that when my youngest daughter was ready to go to college, I would give myself that freedom, I call it, so that I can now work from anywhere and use my gifts, my skill set to add value, but also use the money I would make as a tool so that I can live a life where I don't have to worry about money, be financially independent, as well as visit the world. So in last year, when I decided, my daughter has started college in 2021. And so it was ripe, it was time. It's something I always wanted to do. It was scary as heck. I've been an employee my whole life. I was an accountant before I went to law school. So I've always been in corporate America. And, but I remember it was my birthday and I submitted my resignation. I said, this is gonna be it was my birthday, December 2021. And I launched I worked through January 2022. I took a month off, the shortest month in the year, which is February. And starting March 2022, I was like, okay, we're gonna make this happen. I had to figure it out. It was not as easy. My learning curve to run a business was higher than I anticipated. So lots of frustration, lots of successes, lots of support from the community. I love my community. I know you, Austin, you called me in and did an interview with me. Like I said, Wilson is a client of mine, his company, and him and his wife. And then just I've always served. So a lot of people reached out to me and poured into me and gave me counsel and said, okay, we're here to support you, provided referrals. And here I am, you know, still standing. And I'm grateful.
Right. And we commend you on taking that leap, and that's having that sense of independence to free yourself from corporate and take that leap into entrepreneurship and starting your own law firm. That takes a lot of bravery, you know. And also Sandra is the founder and the visionary behind the Georgia Haitian American Chamber of Commerce Incorporated. And she had a vision at one point, realizing all the Haitian businesses that are growing in the Atlanta area, and to start the Haitian Chamber so that she can bring all the Haitian businesses onto the chamber to provide the services that they need to grow successfully. You know, what can we expect from the chamber this year?
Wow, lots of great things. I'm glad you asked. So June 30th is going to be our 12th year operating. We're planning, we have levels of membership. So we're planning, and again, I want to commend Level 3 MD. They're one of our top tiered premier members. We're planning a golf outing for them, as well as some special treat at a golf. And then we have our Prochain Leader Gala, which happens every year. This year is at August 19th. So I invite everybody on the call on Zoom, people that will see this later. I invite all of them to come get to know us. We pour into the next generation. Prochain Leader basically means future leaders in Creole. And so this is all about the people that are coming behind us, and what great things they're doing, and how do we pour in them and feature them, as well as our members. We hold our members dear and near, because without them, there would be no us. It's a member-driven organization. And to your point, I'm a visionary. I believe in organizing. That's why I co-founded the chamber. And now we're in our third year, co-founded the Haitian American Lawyers Association. I feel like as an immigrant group, we need to stay educated. We need to understand the laws. We need to rally together. And I work closely with the other, immigrant, whether they're Africans or Asians or Caribbeans or Latinos from everywhere, try to bring them in so that we can all support each other. And that doesn't mean white people are excluded. They just already are ahead of the curve. And we just want to make sure that we're, closer to the curve with them, so we can all march together towards the promised land. Because most of the time it's the browner people that tend to be in the back. And we want to say, come on, let's go towards.
It's the process of closing that wealth gap, that economic gap, and someone asked on Facebook if you have to be Haitian to come, and I say no.
Oh, no.
No. Yeah. And Sandra, I've been around the Haitian Chamber a long time, and I'm
day one, making my life miserable. No,
so you see, for everyone else out there whose life I make miserable, you're not alone.
But to your point, Jackie Watson, Natasha Davis, I've always been to the Jamaican, chamber. That's how I met Jason Halliburton. They come to ours. We've always worked very closely. And I think it's all about filling the mission and understanding where we want to go as a people, regardless of where the boat dropped us along the way. And then again, closing that gap.
Yeah. And you know, it's a great resource to, if you're not Haitian, if you're not Caribbean, it's a great resource to network with some really strong, competent businesses. You know,
Yes,
everybody who knows me know I network with everybody. I'm in everybody's
exactly.
community. You know, I haven't been kicked out yet, so I'm in everybody's community. You
Yes,
know,
no,
I
no,
love it.
you do a great job. You add value. And that's what we want. We want everybody to come, and the website to join is gahcci.org/forward join. Again, you can Google the Georgia Haitian and look to join, search, and it'll take you right there. It's an easy process. Click, pay, you're on your way, come to the meetings, get to know us, and use it. The chamber is a platform. I say this all the
Yes,
time. It's a
yes,
nonprofit 501c3 platform that is here to bring resources to the community, the Haitian community and the community at large. And
right.
you make of it what you want. I tell people I dedicate my time to the chamber. I get a lot of referrals from the chamber. So you get what you put in it, just like anything else.
Exactly, exactly. And with that, we're at the 7:30 time limit. And I like, just like I love to start on time, I like to end on time, and to respect people's schedule and people's time. I know everybody's busy and got so much going on. But this has been a fantastic discussion. We've had three wonderful presenters, three female business owners. People say, Austin, you're always featuring a lot of female business owners. I'm like, well, because they're on point. They're on point. I'm not saying that the men are not on point, but I'm one of those guys that like to recognize what the women are doing. I have no problem with that. You know, female businesses are one of the fastest growing demographics in the United States. You know, and we just have to recognize that, you know, women business owners do not get the recognition and the space as, you know, as men, male entrepreneurs. So I have no problem with that. You know, I like to feature people who I know can really bring great, valuable, quality information. And Dr. Amala Luncheon with emotional intelligence, Ms. Carmen Bernard with investing, personal financial planning, personal retirement planning, and Sandra Jean tonight, you know, with avoiding the pitfalls and how to safeguard yourself from legal calamity. You know, we had three great presenters this week during National Small Business Week. I wish we had one more tomorrow night, but I had two people who couldn't do it, and I didn't have the time to really gather thoughts on anyone else. But I am really, really appreciative of these three ladies. They are an authority in their respective spaces. They deserve all the success and the accolades that they receive. And, you know, I thank all of you for joining, not just tonight, but throughout these past 3 days, because again, what Thompson Management Consulting wishes to do, the reason why we're in business is to ensure that we're providing information to our small businesses, providing access to resources, you know, and making sure that we're connecting you with the people who can take you where you want to go as a business owner. So we're excited about that. That's our passion, you know. So we look for people with equal passion, with who are excited about what they do, like Carmen, like Attorney Jean, like Dr. Amala Luncheon. These individuals, these ladies are excited about what they do, and they command that space. They command that authority, and we thank them for what they do. We thank them for giving their time to be with us in these past 3 days. I know there are a lot more business that could have joined us, but hey, you know, this will be recorded. It will be on my YouTube channel, TM Consulting LLC. That's TM as in Thompson Management, the word consulting LLC. And it will be stored there, and you can actually go to YouTube and pull that up and look at it anytime. I always post my videos on my Facebook page. I have my personal and my business Facebook page. And I also post it on my city council page, because many of the individuals in my constituency are business owners. So I like to make sure everybody gets the information, because we want to make sure that we're continuing to to keep this economy vibrant with vibrant businesses, small businesses that are helping to generate the economy. You know, so National Small Business Week, again, I thank you all for joining. There will be other webinars. I don't know when we're going to go back to in-person events. We might be looking at doing some collaborations, but you know, that won't be until probably 2024. But look out for more webinars. You have my contact information. Always look out for more webinars for the next, you know, months. What are we? We're in the 5th month, right? The next 7 months, you know, we'll have, you know, workshops every month coming, you know, so just keep an eye out for that. It will be posted on Facebook. It will be posted and going out with all my contact lists, because I want to make sure that you guys are participating and being involved, you know. So we're gonna reach out to different speakers and make sure we bring you the subject matters, you know, the subjects that matter, and bring you those experts that can really provide the information, the advisement and recommendations that you need to grow sustainably and grow successfully. All right. So thank you all for joining. Thank you to our speaker, to our attendees here on Zoom and on Facebook. We really appreciate your support, and grow successfully. Thank you. Happy National Small Business Week.
Thank you.
Thank you.